Welcome to the Sound of Movement podcast. We are kicking off the year 2021 with an epic show today. We're going to be talking about the critical difference between tendinopathy and acute injury management, answering a great question from one of our online coaching tribe. Strap yourself in. What's up, everybody? This is actually take two. We had some sound issues. Hopefully they're fixed. Let's let us know if the sound is still a problem, guys, on the live stream. I want to quickly welcome back the superstar of Physio Monday, none other than Phil White. How are you, mate?
So great to be back. I've just been off in rural Western Australia in a place called Kununurra, where it's about 40 degrees or more every single day. Lots of saltwater crocs around. Not much time outside, so I've just been hard at work, working behind the scenes on some exciting online projects. But now, just amazed to be back in Sydney. So much going on.
on that online projects, we have a very special sponsor for the show today, Adapt Physio, ADP Physio, which is ADPT, which is Phil and Nilesh's baby that Phil's been working on for quite a while. So we're going to link in the comments here. We're going to link their Facebook page and we're going to link their website. What we would really love you all to do,
link a place for Google reviews.
Yes. What we all want you to do, because you've all experienced Phil's effervescence, and we want you to give them a Google review. Help hack the algorithm for us. Little exercise to show Phil how much you love all the free content he's been giving us here at the desk over the last year or so.
So starting off, it's going to be like, this is for our in-person clinic, but Nilesh and Nilesh is my business partner who I met at the Greater Western Sydney Giants, and he's been one of the top physios there for the last 9 years now. He's going into his 10th season. So expert sports physio, and we're working hard together to put together an online physio solution that will, be able to work with people all around the world and do programs that should, sort you out from any injury you have. So really would appreciate you guys help me out. And if, in the review, just kind of putting down that Phil has talked on the podcast about this and it's helped me in this way.
Yeah,
would be really great.
Share your experiences with Phil's amazing advice over the podcast. So today we actually are diving in to answer a question that came through on our UMS online coaching by Grant Denny. And Grant is a CrossFitter who also works in the construction industry. And he is suffering quite frustrating tendinopathy, or golfer's elbow, as we like to call it, in the forearm. So what I'm going to do, while I link this discussion thread into his comment in the comments, I'd like Phil just to give a little bit of a context about what tendinopathy is and what golfer's elbow is for those playing at home.
Yeah, I thought we'd start a year off with this one, my first episode back, because it is just the most common question we get, and we've talked about it quite a lot before, but I think it's just for anyone who's, tackling the strength game plus any calisthenics in combination, you're going to come along with load management issues and tendinopathy at some point. So the more we can, get on top of this, the better. So yeah, definitely a good one to be talking about, and make sure it's one of those ones where if you haven't had it, you don't really realize how bad it is. And then when you get it, it becomes super frustrating. So learn the secrets to not get it in the first place, and you'll have a happy training life. So with this chat today, we're talking about the key differences in management of tendinopathy and acute injuries. So with tendinopathy, this is definitely something that doesn't necessarily come on by one out of control injury like a torn hamstring or a rolled ankle. That would be your acute injuries. A tendinopathy will happen from it's usually over time. So like a very young, kid, for example, kind of wouldn't get this. It's more of like a tendon development issue if you've changed your load in a big way. So with tendinopathy, it's like with are we talking just elbows today, or are we doing...
Well, talk in a broad sense now, while we build some context around what the difference is between tendinopathy and like an acute muscle tear or something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so with tendinopathy, so this is going to be in the tendon itself, and just a reminder for those playing at home, a tendon is what attaches a muscle to a bone, which is different from ligaments, which is going bone to bone. And basically, there's a whole bunch of fancy cellular processes that happen, but to put it very simply, a tendinopathy happens when we have a rapid change in the amount of loading that the body is used to. The tendon can't quite keep up with this change quickly. It doesn't have the time to adapt quick enough, and will go through a process where it has both sort of a degenerative, it starts to try and turn over the tissues to adapt, but in doing so does a bit of a messy job of it and creates a kind of tendon replacement that isn't as strong as regular tendon, and not quite as good at taking stretching forces and compressive forces, and becomes like long term. It will often stick around for a long time, being quite painful and harder to produce force through. So
it's it's a remodeling of the tendon, and it's a less effective or a less robust tendon that comes afterwards.
Yeah, basically it just like with muscle hypertrophy, it's to gain hypertrophy, you're gonna have to turn over the protein, so you're gonna have protein degeneration and then synthesis as well. So it's a constant sort of turnover to then, with the idea that you're trying to get just slightly more synthesis than you have breakdown, and then you get more muscle. The same kind of thing happens with tendinopathy, where we're trying to get like a fairly even gradual turnover, but if we do something that vastly exceeds what our current capacity is, then you kind of have a lot of breakdown with and then like a quick sort of patch job of a synthesis, and it doesn't work so well.
I like that. I like the simple explanation. Too much breakdown, too much stimulus, and a very, very quick patchwork job of trying to repair it to get it going again. Yeah. And so now
that all comes down to collagen fibers, and basically with tendons, they're, especially in the lower body, are amazing for efficiency in the body. So if we had to use muscles for all of our force and power, then that's a massively metabolically costly activity. So as in, you're going to have to burn a lot of energy to power yourself forward. But we have an Achilles tendon, we have a patellar tendon that are great for basically acting like springs. So then your body has to do less work to propel you forward. So that's why tendons generally have a lot of this fairly sort of stretchy collagen fibers that work as like these sort of super efficiency parts of our body that
don't burn as much energy.
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to trying to adapt a tendon to do load, it needs to basically, the things you have to kind of keep in mind is like total load, how much you're kind of putting reboundy, stretchy forces through it, and also how much compression force you're going to put through it as well.
So this is where I want to go, and I want to just quickly say we've got Grant Denny on the live stream. Welcome, brother. When you hear me talk now, I'm going to be general. I can't be too specific about your situation because I don't know the full history. So I'm going to speak in general terms now. So I apologise if I don't explain this perfectly to your circumstances, but this is a really great example because Grant has given us a fairly good picture here in his comment. There's two mechanisms here that I'm going to highlight. First and foremost, and Phil and I have done shows about macro and micro loading, and we won't go into too much detail about that because we do talk about that in our injury management and injury rehab series that's coming up in a few weeks. But there are two factors going on here. There is a macro factor, which is Grant's employment, his profession. He's in construction, and he says here that he's often gripping onto a 7 to 12 kilogram jackhammer. I've worked in construction myself before. I've used jackhammers before. It's pretty intense. It's like heavy, lots and lots of exposure, lots of stimulus over a long period of time, especially if you're on the big hammers all day long, and especially if you're having to use them in awkward positions, where you're not just straight up and down vertical, where you're having to chip sideways and maybe chip down an old retaining wall or something like that. So you've got that first macro factor where he is exposed to far more load than the average person.
on top of training
and this is the second thing I want to talk about. He's also a CrossFitter, and CrossFit is a very unique style of exercise, which is one of its positives. It is extremely motivating because there is a competition element there, and there is this blurred line between when you go to the gym, depending on how strict your coaches, your culture, all of that sort of thing is, there is always an element of outdoing yourself or other people every single workout. You want to compete. You want to train to compete, to do the WODs as efficiently and effectively and as quickly as possible. And so there is often this element of training in CrossFit that goes far beyond what an average person will do, which is that you go at it much harder, you expose yourself to a lot more load, and there is not as much thought to load management in a lot of CrossFit gyms. And there are pros and cons to that. The pro is that it creates amazing culture. There's an incredible vibe. It's very, very infectious and motivating, and you tend to get a lot more work done. You burn a lot more calories in a very short amount of time. The downside to it is, though, that often there's not a lot of thought to load management, and you expose your body to excessive loads very quickly without sort of slowly building up to it, because you want to go in there and see what your body's capable of. There's an element in any sport, in any sporting code, whether it's marathon running, which we're about to talk about with Grant as well, whether it's football, whether it's rock climbing. The moment you go in and expose yourself to that load, there's moderation goes out the window. You want to see what your body can do.
Which the body, human body is incredibly resilient, and usually you kind of get away with it. Usually you kind of have there's a bit of a buffer if you overload, and that's part of the programming you do for advanced strength training is what's called the accumulation
super compensation.
Super compensation, where you're actively trying to
prescribed overreaching.
You're trying to overreach, and so a bit of overreaching here and there with adequate rest in as long as you're also ticking off good micro loading, which we'll probably just quickly cover as well, if your technique's good and all of that. You do generally have a bit of leeway, but this is a real classic combination of with CrossFit plus really challenging physical labor, and also that he's also now training for an ultramarathon.
Yep.
Is that, and if he's already started to train for an ultramarathon, that even though that's a generally a lower body activity, you've still got to think about with tendinopathy, when you're trying to get adaptation and synthesis of muscle fibers and tendon fibers, that's all costly work. You need to have the fuel, you need to have the macronutrients right to lay down new tissues there and repair there. And if you're really fatigued from also doing marathon running, ultramarathon training, and you've got resources going towards the rest of your body and just the massive caloric demand that is ultramarathon running and CrossFit, then that recovery piece is just so key for
100%.
So you can kind of imagine that if your body's kind of figure out okay, I have X amount of repair to do today, where am I going to put the resources? And maybe your elbow may just be missing out because you're just going through so much elsewhere.
And we'll talk about. I want to get to that piece towards the end with where we can be quite specific to a strategy for Grant. But from a general standpoint, the thing that I want to really drive home now, and this is a key takeaway for everybody listening, the way that you load your body, the obvious areas for all of us who work out in the gym or do a sport or compete is that sport or that gym. But it's very, very important that we understand that there are other loading variables in our lifestyle that play a huge role in whether we are injured or not, especially when it comes to tendinopathy, which is, just most commonly a sort of a build-up of just excessive load that's not really managed properly. It can happen in a single instance. You can have an abusive load that just tips the scale, which I would like to, at this point, talk about load management. And Phil has the best analogy of load management that we've been beating the drum of whilst he was away, even because I love it so much, which is the concept of the cup. And why don't you explain
bucket,
that?
But cup can work.
Bucket, okay. I've been saying a cup, but you say a bucket.
Well, I think like a bucket seems bigger. You're not going to overflow a cup too quickly.
Well, we're all buckets here, but not everyone has reached the bucket level just yet.
Fair enough. So with every part of your body, each sort of structure that takes load it has a certain capacity, and so these words like capacity and load can just seem a bit like meaningless and weird. So I like to think of it with this bucket and tap. If your capacity is your bucket, so how much can you fit in your bucket, and your tap is how much load you're putting into the system. So
CrossFit would be more like a fire hydrant, like a hose.
Yeah, definitely. And so your body isn't like a singular bucket. So you kind of think about like your elbow tendons are its own bucket, and your muscles,
knees.
The knees. Like every kind of area has its own capacity to do work. So someone who's done lots of calisthenics training, who's an absolute beast with can do front levers and muscle ups and whatever, might then go for a 5K run thinking that they're really fit and strong, but they haven't considered the capacity of like how big their bucket is for their Achilles tendon, and might just quickly and their calf muscles, and they'll quickly like find that they won't be able to walk for the rest of the week if they just try and punch out a fast 5K run. Even though they're really fit and strong at other things, their capacity to do running is low. So basically, if they haven't done, the only running they've ever done is to get to the bus occasionally, then their tap will be like a small trickle. So the amount of load they're putting into their calf muscles, their Achilles, is a small trickle. And then you go for a 5K run because you just had a big Christmas dinner and you're feeling like you want to burn a few calories. Suddenly you've just again put the fire hose on a small cup. So,
yep. The water goes everywhere.
I think it's just a nice way for people to visualize, kind of thinking about, okay, if I'm trying to start something new, like what structures are involved, what parts of your body, even if you can't name them, like think about just, like feet, like legs, how much water, how much have I been turning on this tap? And if I haven't been turning on it much, then, you've just got to slowly increase things, because the great thing about this magical bucket is it will adapt to how much water you put in it. But if you do it too fast, so if you really just turn the fire hose on, your bucket doesn't have time to adapt, things spill over. The spilling over is, in this case, having an injury, which might be a tendinopathy, might be an acute injury. It depends on the mechanism and structure.
Yeah. And like this morning, I'll give you an example, and Grant's answered this here, which is going to build even more context. But I went out for my morning walk this morning because my bucket overflowed on New Year's Eve because I went for a run and ended up having to change my my run course, and did way too much hills because they'd closed everything off for the fireworks display in Sydney, and it really stuffed me last minute. And I did a lot more hill than I'm used to, and because I've had a knee reconstruction, running downhill really exceeds my load capacity in my knee at the moment. And I've only been able to walk ever since, and hardly walk. I've been hobbling because I've really overdone it. But on my usual path today, I saw so many New Year's resolution runners that I haven't seen before, because I take the same path every day. You see the same people going on their daily jog across the Harbour Bridge. And there's a lot of overweight people who are really going for it, which is fantastic. But they were punishing themselves, like really not looking like looking like they were in pain and exceeding their load capacity today. And it's something that you need to really take into consideration. This is why so many people's New Year's resolutions fail, because by the end of January, everyone's banged up and injured and suffering quite intense pain in the knees and the feet and the ankles. You got to think about what your load capacity is, and you got to think about how to adapt it slowly and progressively. And for many of us, like me included, look at how fit I am. To start out, I wasn't able to run. I had to walk, and I walked for weeks and weeks and weeks, slowly building up to small bouts of running, where if I did 5 kilometers, I'd only run a kilometer. I'd just do bursts of running, and then I got up to doing 3 kilometers of running and 2 kilometers of walking, and then slowly turned over to being able to do the whole 5 kilometers as a run. And that's what we're talking about with building up load capacity, allowing your bucket to slowly grow to the size that it needs to be.
Sorry, I just couldn't let this escape. Do you guys know that it's Richard's birthday today?
Is it Richard's birthday today?
Happy birthday to you.
Happy
How old are you,
birthday.
Richie? 21 yet?
32.
32. 32,
Okay.
the big dick. He's
Happy-
32.
Happy birthday, Richard.
Yeah, I couldn't let that one slide. So
Yeah.
everybody that's tuning in, send Richard some birthday love. He is the voice of God who manages all of the magic here, and we love him.
We were so close to getting through this episode without an explicit tag, but then here comes Rad.
Yeah.
And happy New Year, everyone!
Get out of here. For those of you who don't know, Rad is a dick. No, Rad is training our new gym manager, Will, who we will get on the show to introduce you to him. But it's a big deal for us here at Unity Gym because Rad has sort of been the gym manager for quite a while, and it's going to give him more time to really sink his teeth into our online program and coaching. But back to our the love is pouring in, Richie. Back to our topic of discussion, because this is very important. You know, this concept of load management, and I love Grant's story because he is. It's a really, really good opportunity to show that there are all these different factors of load or stimulus.
Yeah, and he's just kind of given another clue here with talking in a comment here, just saying, yeah, I stuffed up when running when I first started and ended up with a stress fracture in my foot, and then a few months later a runner's knee. So with stress fractures, like that's just a really kind of clear sign that not only like load management is part of it, but then also like recovery is the biggest thing with stress fractures, because just like tendons, just like muscles, your bones are going through constant remodeling. So they're constantly breaking down and building back up again. And stress fractures will happen if you get in someone who's like fit and healthy. Like usually happens if you're really like undernourished. And with this combination that I'm seeing you doing, which is CrossFit and ultramarathon running, the only client I've ever seen who's had rhabdomyolysis, which is something that people didn't really know, like only really thought about with old people who had falls and then lay on the ground for like, a few days on end where their muscles start to eat themselves and break down. CrossFit's really brought rhabdomyolysis back. And one of my clients who was training for marathons and competitive CrossFit at the same time, he's the only person I've ever seen do it. And that's basically where your muscles start breaking down so quickly that and they can't remodel, and that's just the ultimate sort of end game for bad load management plus not fueling and not recovering. So
I'd like to I'm going to say something possibly a little bit controversial here, but in my opinion, your body is either adapting or it's breaking down. If you're not stimulating your body, and this is what happens to elderly people quite badly if they don't get enough exercise throughout their life. All the tissues in your body, your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, your bones. I'm not talking about your organs here so much. But those tissues are constantly turning over, new cells. All tissues are, but just let's leave organs out of it for now. And it really is governed by the way they're stimulated, And if you're not stimulating them in a good way, then they're generally breaking down. They're devolving, And I know that Phil doesn't want me to paint a really bleak picture for everyone here, but for us, we're very lucky because everyone listening to this and everyone in the Movement Mastermind, everyone definitely in our UMS online coaching and here at Unity Gym, we're very lucky because exercise is a part of our life and we're stimulating our body in the right way. But where we tend to go wrong is with overstimulus. We tend to, unlike the majority of people that are understimulating their body, we tend to get a little bit too carried away and just go, okay, and push it too far. And that's what I disliked about CrossFit when it became super popular, was that just by nature, by the culture, CrossFit is a sport, and the way that they do the WODs and the CrossFit Games and all that, it's a very, very entertaining sport. I love it. I love watching it, but it's not necessarily the way we should exercise. And when we train to increase our load capacity, we train to reduce our risk of injury, and we train to improve our performance factors, speed, agility, strength, force output, things like that, power. And CrossFit kind of blurred the lines when it first came out, and I know it's come a long way since, and I know that it's very different in most of the CrossFit boxes. That the coaches are now really getting this and really understanding, and they're not doing WODs every single day, you know. But there is still a culture there of people who are continually pushing their body to breaking point. That is just the nature of it, and it's what it bred. It bred this, you know, extremism in training, you know, and it never works. Extremism never works, you know. Balance and moderation.
Well, I feel like the unfortunate thing is, like, sometimes it does, and that gives people there's just some freaks who, you know, just happen to kind of get away with, you know, with load management murder, and like, because the human body is super variable, and, you know, you like the bell curve kind of exists for most things in human performance, and like.
But the problem is that those are the people that are spotlight.
Yeah, exactly.
That are made a big deal of. Yeah. But they're the like n equals 1 in that case. You know, like they are the outlier.
Totally.
And then we model ourselves on that person, and we're like, okay, I want to perform like that. And for most of us, it just doesn't work. Totally. You know, and so this is I think this is just such an important point to be driving home, and I do not want to discourage Grant, but this is where I think we can flip this to, okay, so what does Grant do to overcome this, and what do you do when you find yourself in a similar position?
Well, Lee Clements has just asked a really great question here, which sort of does tie into it. I think is a really important thing that I do want to clear up. So Lee's asked, when does tendinopathy become an injury? And so that's quite a philosophical question. What is an injury? Which we maybe won't go into here, but that's a really good point about like changes in morphology versus changes in pain. And so what morphology is, basically in shape and structure. So changes in shape and structure, as we talked about at the beginning, like that does happen in tendinopathy. You can generally see it on a scan, a certain type of scan, usually ultrasound, and you may see changes in the tendon structure itself where the collagen fibers that I mentioned before don't quite line up as nicely. But the really interesting thing about that is people who have these changes in tendon structure don't necessarily then have changes in pain or performance. So there's loads of studies with like collegiate volleyball players who will often develop knee, like patellar tendinopathy, because they just do so much jumping on hard ground over and over and over again. And like pretty much all of them had tendinopathy-like changes, but not all of them had any change in pain or function. So it's really key to understand here that this is another example where imaging doesn't like rule diagnosis and injury management, because you might scan a tendon, find out there's tendinopathy-like changes, but you don't actually have any changes. So with rehabbing a tendon, a tendinopathy injury, we're not trying to make the tendon look pretty again. What we're trying to do is get your function up and get your pain right, and that comes from a gradual reintroduction to loading. But yeah, just don't, anyone out there who's got scanned and saying like, oh no, I have a tendinopathy, but they've never realized they had an issue. Injury, don't now suddenly give yourself
don't create an injury identity for yourself.
That's just a really key point there that I'm glad Lee brought up. Now going back to kind of somewhat specifics for Grant, because just like I always have to say with these Physio Monday questions, this isn't a physio consultation, so this is general advice. But I think Grant just brings up such a great example of, for people this time of year who are often like, okay, this in 2021, I'm ticking off a CrossFit comp, I'm ticking off an ultra marathon, I'm doing this plus, work. So I think it's a really good general one to talk about. Like it's just...
Can I start?
Yeah, you
Can I start? So the very first thing that I recommend for anyone who's in Grant's situation, which there are going to be plenty of people, there are also going to be plenty of people who find that they end up in this situation over the next couple of months because they've had some time off training and they come back to the gym or their sport and try to kick off where they left off, and they've been away for enough time that their body has lost a bit of conditioning.
Their bucket has shrunk.
Their bucket has shrunk. The bucket starts to shrink after about 2 weeks, maybe 3, depending on your training age and the intensity that you used to train at. For the first week, I like to say you tend to still adapt from this previous stimulus. The second week, you tend to really plateau. And then by the third week, you start to really lose your load capacity. It starts to drop off quite quickly. And if you stay away from the exercise or stimulus for more than 4 weeks, you can count on the fact that you will need to regress and, kind of start building your load capacity up again. People that are away for more than 5 or 6 weeks, it's almost like sort of kicking off again. You'll remember and your body will adapt faster, but you really have to start scaling it right back again, your load and intensity, your volume and intensity. So you're going to find a lot of people fall into this bucket. The very first thing you need to do is have a recovery plan. You have to have a recovery strategy, just like your exercise strategy. So if Grant is, running 4 or 5 days a week, which he probably is because he's training for an ultra marathon, and then he's hitting the CrossFit a couple of times a week, or he's doing our foundations program now, which is still, a lot of load on the muscles and systems. He needs to have a matching recovery strategy. Like what are you eating? How much are you sleeping? How much water are you drinking? All these different things come into it. What's your,
Stress.
what's that?
Stress.
Your stress, everything. What's everything else like in the world, and how much does it support the intense amount of exercise that you're exposing your body to? And if it's not, then something's got to give, and you've got to find balance there. And that's the very first thing I would say to everybody. You need to take into consideration, it starts with sleep. If you're exercising to that capacity and you're not in bed for 9 hours a night, forget it. You don't have a chance, because even if you're in bed for 9 hours a night, you're probably only getting about 7.5 hours of actual sleep. Your body doesn't just, unless you're my fiance Kalisha falling asleep, she falls asleep after 5 minutes. Your body just doesn't. And I monitor my sleep very, very precisely, because it's something that I really struggle with and have to manage. Now, if I'm in bed for 9 hours a night, I get roughly 20 to 30 minutes of deep sleep, where you're really, really recovering. I am a terrible sleeper. And so you need to take that into consideration. What kind of a sleeper are you? Are you the type of person that gets a lot of deep sleep? Now, I would urge someone who's really taking their sport and their training seriously to get some sort of a wearable that they can wear at night and monitor their sleep, because it's something that most people don't take into consideration, and if you're not getting enough sleep, I'm telling you right now, your body's not recovering. Like, it doesn't matter what supplements you take. It doesn't matter how you eat. It doesn't matter how you try to manage load in the gym or outside of the gym. If you're not getting enough sleep, then it's like bang. You are not getting it. You're not getting your recovery in, and you're going to end up breaking down. And things like rhabdomyolysis may become a reality for you in the future. Especially if you're trying to do CrossFit.
I think he was also going vegan as well at the same time. This guy.
Is he?
No, sorry, my guy. He got
Your
Rambo.
guy. Okay,
So
right.
It's
Okay.
really ticking a lot of boxes pretty hard.
So then that brings on the second thing that I want to talk about, nutrition. Are you eating enough dietary protein? Because you're turning over muscle proteins, and if you need muscle protein synthesis to repair this tissue, then are you getting enough protein in? And if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, you need to have a serious supplement protocol going to support yourself, because most of the time you just can't consume enough protein calories to get it right. If you're eating that, you really have to think about it. I don't know many high-level vegan athletes that don't supplement protein or don't supplement amino acids. It's just very difficult to get the spectrum you need of dietary protein. So that's your second thing, nutrition. And you really need to take a serious look at this. There's no room for shitty calories if you're performing at that level. You need to start thinking about how you're getting your caloric your food in, and what type of calories you are eating. Is it crap or is it good? And then after that, you got to start looking at stress mechanisms in your body, because exercise stress, running stress is very, very serious on the body. And so are you stressed in other areas of your life? Do you have financial stress? Do you have relationship stress? Do you have career or work-related stress? And those things are going to play a huge role in how your body performs. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that, we could, it's a whole other episode probably talking about different types of stress, and eustress is what's the word for a positive stress, which is something you adapt to, but something like work stress or lifestyle stress, you don't adapt to that. You have to manage that. So and just like with eustress, too much of that can then become too much of that positive stress can then be a negative thing long term. So I really enjoyed using the Waking Up app for a bit of mindfulness meditation with Sam Harris. I think that's a really excellent way to do it. Everyone likes different things, but yeah, I think that's a really positive one there.
Yeah, we talked about that in the last week that we did our goal setting and motivation series. So look, guys, we're going to bring this in for a landing. We were a little bit late getting started. Is there anything else you want to finish
Well, Grant's just kind of said that he's currently working. His workout week is 3 runs a week and 3 to 4 days of Foundations program, plus 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep every night. Tracks water consumption. All of this is due to mainly listening to the podcast. So. Nice one, Grant.
Fantastic.
It sounds like, you're getting a good sort of mix there. With running, maybe we should bring Tom DeCanto back on to talk about running programming, but with the top level runners that I work with, their runs don't look the same. So just like with training, we don't do the same workout 3 to 4 days a week. We change different stimulus on different parts of the body, different energy systems. So just like that, look into your running programming. Are you just punching out the same distance and the same every time, or are you doing interval sessions? Are you doing hill sessions? Because all of those will stress different energy systems, which will then kind of have their own recovery pathways, which means that you won't be overloading just one bucket.
I love how Tom even said that, when Rad asked about barefoot running, he said, I use it as a certain stimulus to just change things up a little bit every once in a while. It's like an exercise. It's like using a bench press and then switching out to a dumbbell press for a workout, just to get a little bit more stimulus on the stabilizers, That's a really good point.
And there was so much more we wanted to talk about here with like changing kind of microloading in with it, for someone who's got tendinopathy, like we still want you to be doing the big compound movements, but maybe you change it from the bench press, which might be a bit aggravating, to a dumbbell neutral sort of press to make it, or even using things like wrist wraps can be quite helpful. So there's so much more to kind of go into here, and we didn't even get to acute injury management, the differences there, but the basic one is tendinopathy, don't just rest it, get your load management right. Acute injury, give it a little bit of rest. Work back into it, but that's there's a whole year for this.
That's right. That's right. We got so much to talk about. We got so much coming at you guys, and it's very exciting because we are even going to have Nilesh on as well with Phil. So we're going to have double trouble physiotherapists once a week, and it's going to be fun.
And we'll be starting to really ramp up our similar, just like with Unity here, where you're getting lots of training information. We're going to be putting out even more sort of physio information through ADPT Physio. So it's all coming. And so for ADPT, that does stand for Athletic Development and Physical Therapy. So we're all about building people into athletes and treating people like athletes, which is maybe not what you've experienced in your current or your past physio experiences. So it's all very exciting. I did post some links in the Facebook chat here to liking our Facebook page. I've moved away from Switched On Physio. I'm going to put that direct people to ADPT Physio. I've also put a link for our a Google review would be super helpful as we do get started up. So I'll also put that in the podcast notes. So would love for you guys to help me out as I get this thing launched. Yeah, get yourself over there, like the page, give them a Google review. As I said, ADPT Physio is partnering with Unity Gym, and we are their first treatment room is in the gym here. It's fantastic, very, very exciting, and we can't wait to see what these boys start coming out with this year. They're two very, very, very smart cookies. So keep following them, keep watching, and guys, we will see you tomorrow. Phil's going to be back on the show as a regular fixture, and we will be introducing Nilesh, his business partner, to you shortly as well, and we will also introduce our new gym manager, Will. So we'll see you all tomorrow. Happy birthday, Richie. You.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, that's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.